Since we are talking about soil, let's agree that almost everything is coming from soil, and when it degrades, it goes back also to soil. Unfortunately, more than 50% of the soil of the world is degrading and is being lost due to different reasons: urbanization, salinity, erosion, overgrazing, and so on. There are many reasons why we are losing the soil. And I think it's not too late to catch up and to start doing what is really expected from us as human beings, and as scientists, as initiators, and as environmentalists, and even just as citizens in the globe, that we have to do something. Honestly, there are many approaches that could be done to prevent the continuation of the soil degradation. I'm very happy for this opportunity. I would like to say that NARC, the National Agriculture Research Center, is doing a lot of work in this field, and I really would love to invite all of you, whenever it is convenient for you, to come and see what we are doing in this field and in the field of land reclamation, and also the cultivation of degraded soils, including saline soils and alkaline soils and so on. First of all, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Well, I will not read from the paper because I know you very well for more than 20 years. I think one of the very passionate initiators, hard workers in the field of agriculture, environment conservation. Hassan Jaajaa is one of the well-known people who are trying to lead land reclamation and also working against afforestation. They have been doing many important initiatives related to those issues, and also to integrate the action into realistic work plans that could be applied. I don't want to take longer than it is allowed for me. Each of you have 15 minutes. I was given 5 minutes. I only spoke for 4.5 minutes, so I stop here.
Speak for less. Thank you, Livia, for this invitation, and I extend my thanks to the French Cultural Center for hosting us. Salam to all. We, human beings, need plants and animals, if not vegetarians, if we are not vegetarians, to eat in order to live. Animals need plants and animals to eat and live, whereby plants do not need animals and humans in order to live. They can live by their own. They only need soil, of course, and water, but it's mainly the soil, their habitat. So, soil is the start of life. That's the very importance of soil. We look upon soil as a very busy, living community. It's actually a community with multi-million microorganisms and organisms. They are in extremely vast quantities. They live in equilibrium. They have very keen symbiotic relations. That is, they need each other in order to live and make this stable balance. And that's how they serve the life on earth. So for us, soil is not it, it's they, actually. To mention some of the points clarifying the importance of soil, I would go for the following. Soil provides footholds for plants. We have trees, they should be living on soil. It provides nutrients for plants to eat. It stores water so that the plants can survive. It stores most of the carbon on earth. Soil stores much more than all the forests on earth of carbon. It is a buffer, an excellent buffer against the pollutions, the pollutants that we throw. And it filters the water so that the water table, the underground water table, would be potable for us. It provides us with lots of material for industry, construction, and it's also the platform for our homes. If the soil is polluted, eroded, or depleted, then most of what we have mentioned is disrupted, affecting directly in a negative manner the cycle of life on earth. Nowadays, the consumptive way of life we are leading is deteriorating this great complex equilibrium that the Creator has made. Greed and ignorance are leading us to behave as if we are the very last generation on earth. Polluting water, air, sea, and soil are growing so fast that we might soon reach a point of no return in order to sustain the ecological balance that is keeping us alive. Desertification is crawling fast, leading to erosion of the most fertile topsoil. Plastic products are breaking down to particles, and these particles are not biodegradable. That is, they do not degrade to become part of the natural soil. Industrial byproducts are converting agricultural soil to storage pits of poisonous material. Byproducts of nuclear arms and nuclear energy production sites are also downgrading the soil. Downgrading the soil quality wherever they are dumped. Climate change and global warming are disrupting the ecosystem and hence causing the distinction of lots of animals, plants, insect species, which has a direct effect on the living community in the soil. A deep change in the sense of responsibility is needed, and this should lead to drastic changes in the way we humans are running the show on Earth. I should mention here that most of this damage, which I talked about, is made by the leading industrial countries and the international companies having enough authority and control over states and laws in different countries. Thank you.
for the very passionate words and introduction. We are also very glad and happy to have an outstanding Jordanian architecture. She is architect. She is Deema Assaf. She is the director of TAYYUN company, and she is trying through her work and research to integrate plants into urban areas. She has been doing several activities in this field. I do not want to take that much time of introducing you and maybe not giving you enough of what you deserve to be spoken about you, but I can say that it's very rare that we can see architectures or architects who can see the beauty of plants and their value in the improvement of the ecosystem. We are very glad to introduce you, Deema, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nizar. Thank you all for being here. I will share a few slides, highlighting some of the issues that we see from our surveys and work in the past few years. Okay, so this is a satellite image of north of Jordan. And we can see that in a country like Jordan, we do not need a soil expert to know the different types of the soil. We can just look at the satellite image and we can see Harat al-Sham, the part that is paved with volcanic eruptions with basalt. This is the basalt badia, basalt floor badia. We can see the Hamad, also the parts that are part of the Mediterranean belt. We can see the Terra Rossa, the red soil, or Enzina, parts of it. We can see these different colors even from satellite image, and we can see the grey tissue that is Amman, and how we are replacing topsoil with concrete and asphalt. So it's really interesting. Just from looking at this, we can see many of the activities that is affecting soil in Jordan, including some of the mining activities that are seen in bright white, exposing the bones of geology. And that is one of the things that I would like to offer a different reading of the landscape, different understanding of the anatomy of the landscape. If we can see bedrock as the bones of the landscape, and soil as its flesh. If we are to look at water, and we can actually see the seasonal and perennial water courses. These are the arteries and veins of the land. And if we are to look at the fungal network as the nervous system that is connecting life and vegetation as the final layer, basically the skin of the land. Yes. So to single out any one of these, we would be basically adopting a very reductive view of the landscape. It's about having this multi-layered, really holistic understanding of the landscape, where we see all of these different items. For example, if we look at the soil, the fungal network is what makes it alive. The vegetation is what keeps the fungal network alive, and of course water is crucial to keep the system working. The present-day landscape of Jordan is mostly old brown, and many of us might not know that most of Jordan was thick forests and dense savannas. From recent research and by archaeologists and paleobotanists, we can trace the transformation of the landscape, and we can even identify some of the keystone species, the main plants that used to be found. And we know that this is part of the research on Tel Hisban, south of Amman. But there's amazing research by many archaeologists and paleobotanists for different parts of Jordan that would give us this peek into the native ecology that used to be found. And this took place across the span of thousands of years. clearing the vegetation, losing the topsoil through erosion from wind, water, until we reach what we see today. And today, in different parts of the world, from the Amazons to Southeast Asia, we can see that this process is taking place not across the span of thousands of years, but a few years or decades. And we can see the clearance of the landscape, just removing old growth forests that took thousands of years to be established, to be replaced with industrial agricultural projects. And with the loss of the skin of the earth, we are losing topsoil that is being eroded to the bottom of the ocean. And once we lose the skin, the protective skin, and once we lose the soil, eventually rivers would dry up and the landscape would transform into a ghost of what it used to be. And in some of the countries, it might seem like a very unlikely scenario. Almost surreal, probably. So, yes. I would like to share a story from Jordan that is indirectly connected to soil erosion. Because, we might know some of the direct effects causing soil erosion, but this is a very long story starting from desert kites. If you do not know desert kites, these are, and it wasn't left for speculation. Our ancestors provided clues of what desert kites were used for. So basically, these are structures found in the eastern deserts. We have around 3,000 of them in Jordan and 2,000 in Saudi Arabia, and it extends from Jabal Buz in Syria to parts of Saudi Arabia. And these structures were used for hunting. Our ancestors built walls from the basalt stone that was found in the desert, and it would have this funnel shape that ends with an enclosure, either a pit or a room, almost roofless room, with high walls where the deers and other animals cannot escape. So they would chase these animals, and it was part of securing food at the time, instead of going hunting and either being lucky and finding and coming back with food that would be sufficient. Some days they might not be as lucky, and they would have to sleep with an empty stomach. So they found this way where they would have almost meat on demand. I took the liberty to use some of the petroglyphs and come up with this small story that is perfectly. Can we go back to the first one? Yes. No. The second one. Yes. Okay. So with mass hunting, definitely, and having these enclosures full of prey animals, this was thank you. Not the previous one? Okay, so basically that was one of the things that would attract predators to come really close to where people used to live. So lions, leopards, wolves, they would come quite close to where people used to live. Whether it's due to lack of prey animals because of the mass hunting, or the fact that they have these enclosures that are quite tempting to predators. So, and we can see, this is also tracing one of the petroglyphs, the drawings on the rocks in the eastern Badia. We can see many drawings depicting hunting scenes of lions and other predators. And if we are to understand predators as keystone species whose absence would result in the collapse of the ecosystem, we can better understand how this would affect the landscape as we see it today. So with the absence of lions or other predators, we can expect that there would be an increase in the number of different herbivores which would cause also an increase in the human population, but this would cause much stresses on the landscape. And with time, it would be deteriorated beyond its carrying capacity, and beyond a certain threshold, it would be quite difficult for the landscape to recover. And probably the present-day landscape, the last one, is the loss of most of the woody plants in the Jordan. This is basically for the Badia, where the lizard skies are found. And basically what we have now is a landscape that is stuck in one of the early stages of its evolution, or natural succession. And with the grazing that we have today, it's basically we are keep resetting the landscape to a very primitive state. And I would like to share a few photos that were taken recently, and we can see the effect of overgrazing. Some of the native species are only found in this part. Some of the native species that we have in Jordan are only found in this particular location in the Eastern Badia. And in our recent visits, it was really disturbing to see that some of them are overgrazed to the point that this year we couldn't find any seeds of this one species that is already critically endangered in Jordan. And we can also see the effect on soil erosion around the rattan shrubs. I'm not sure if it's clear enough, but you can see how the plants are holding what's remaining of the soil, and around it from erosion you can see difference, tens of centimeters of soil that has been eroded around these plants. And it's been ongoing for decades and hundreds of years, and it's still ongoing, unfortunately. So if we are to leave nature to recover on its own, this process might take 100 or 300 years. It depends on the lack of human intervention and the presence of soil to start with. But with time, nature will be using plants to hold soil in place, starting from annuals and then gradually developing, building soil, and we can see how the cross-section increases the depth of the soil as nature addresses the need for the deeper soil for more mature plants, and addressing deficiencies, building soil life. So this process typically takes 100 to 300 years. But unfortunately, we are stuck in the very first two steps, where we basically keep resetting the landscape to bare land from overgrazing and human intervention, different activities. So through our work, we try to restore or we try to bring back the native vegetation cover through small urban forests in different parts of the city. This is our first pilot site, and it was alone, a flat, static, ecological desert in that sense. And we transformed the soil through different interventions using recycling organic waste from agricultural activities in Jordan, addressing, improving soil texture, and addressing some of the deficiencies, but most importantly, introducing indigenous microorganisms and soil life. So this is the forest to be, the baby forest at planting day. And basically we can see the tiny saplings and the soil covered with mulch. And after 2.5 years, the site was transformed into a thick baby forest. It's quite dense. One cannot really, walk into it. Some of these trees were above 3 meters high. Slow-growing species were about 1.7 meters. So it was really interesting to see the transformation of the landscape. And For us, most part of it is due to the soil intervention, and only within a few weeks from planting, we can see the forest floor carpeted with mushrooms. As you know, through our intervention, we try to establish the fungal network, which acts as the wood wide web connecting all of the trees together and having the forest act as a single organism. So when we talk about soil intervention, as I said, there's improving the physical or chemical characteristics, but most importantly, it's about introducing soil life and making the soil life and indigenous microorganisms back. So, just to briefly introduce some of the benefits, and as most of the interventions that we see would focus on preserving soil or, just introducing nutrients through the use of different organic matters or chemical fertilizers. But when we talk about the microorganisms of the soil, and I would like to quickly go through some of the benefits that we can get. Through having a living soil, with a strong fungal network, we would have improved plant growth rate, we would have improved seed germination, and we can see that there are amazing photos. Even if you quickly research on Google, you can see the difference and amazing results when it comes to increased crop yield as well. And increased soil nutrient availability, because most often when we talk about soil depletion, we need to talk about the depletion of micronutrients in the soil. One of the disturbing facts that I came across in one of the research papers was we now have to eat 8 oranges to get the nutrients that our grandparents used to get from eating 1 orange. And when we talk about agriculture production, we can actually reduce it to a fraction of what it is today if we work on soil building and improving soil characteristics, and also increase soil carbon sequestration. And definitely it would help us with disease resistance, drought resistance. One of the interesting facts from Paul Stamets, he mentions that we would have 10,000% increase in surface absorbing area of roots if we have an active fungal network in the soil, in addition to salinity resistance and toxicity resistance. So it is really interesting to tap into this unexplored potential, and it's part of the living landscape around us. It's about understanding how nature works and mimicking the different processes and putting it into work through our different projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very impressive presentation and very nice, actually talkative pictures. Thank you very much. Well, I have known Mira for some time. Okay. Mira is a very dedicated scientist. I knew her working with ICARDA. ICARDA is one of the, I can say, sister research centers that we are working with, and we are incubating within the National Agriculture Research Center. ICARDA is the International Institute for Research in Dryland, and Mira have been doing amazing work in the land reclamation, especially in dry areas. We are really very proud that we have been teaming in 3 very important maps that were developed for the first time in Jordan, and they are published online actually. The first one was the flash flood hazard map, master plan for the whole country. The second one was the green water harvesting map, which is doing a lot of and giving a lot of attention about harvesting water for the plants rather than for human consumption directly. And also the last one was the land use map. I'm sure that Mira will give us also a nice enlightenment on this very important topic, especially with her long-term experience, especially in Badia area. And I would love really to invite you to visit her experimental site, which became really a demonstration site in Najdiya, close by to the airport. So, Mira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nizar. Thank you all. Thanks for the invitation. This is a pleasure for us presenting ICARDA. And I have to admit that I was so impressed with your presentation because you saved a lot of time for me to come up with the idea how we can bring back the equilibrium status of the ecosystem that it was in the past. But I think I have, for you and others, I could have hope through a proven scientific method. So I will be doing like this every time we're doing something, okay? So in general, I don't want to be the boring speaker here, but since we're International Center for Science in Dry Areas, I just wanted to give you an image of how dryland are spreading out, especially in the globe. They are covering 47% of the Earth's surface. They can be in semi-arid, arid, and hyper-arid region. But most of these land consider rangeland area. And rangeland considered to provide an important ecosystem services to the people who are living near or around these areas. It supports 91% of grazing lands and support 50% of world livestock. And a good example of dryland country is Jordan. In general, people understand rangeland differently. If you ask someone in US about rangeland, it differs from our rangeland ecosystem. It can be in the mountain, it can be in tundra, but in Jordan, it is defined by the law of agriculture that it is any area receives less than 200 millimeter. And if we look into the map of the rainfall isoheat, we can see like those area of rangeland based on the government definition of it, covering around 90% of the country area. But still, these next please, these rangeland are important. Even life changed on those lands. In the past, it was nomadic lifestyle. The Bedouin used to move from country to country. With time, border is closed, and the Bedouin has to settle down in their areas, and their lifestyle changed. Even the livestock grazing changed. In the past, camel grazing were dominating the Badia of Jordan, but currently we can see mostly sheep and goats. It is also important for milk and meat production. We have around 4 million livestock head in Jordan, the majority of it living in the north, middle, and southern Badia. It is also home of biodiversity. If you read books, you can see that a lot of native plant species that grows in the Badia, but they are also endangered now to be disappear. It is also important for water resources. Like we know all this area, 90% of our country area, it receives rainfall, okay? Even if it is low, this rainfall is important that it goes to the downstream areas of the country. So, what are the problems in the rangeland? These are from Al-Najdiya village where we're doing our work. These are dust storms. Water leave the sites without any intention to keep because of the traditional land use of the farmers and the people living there. they are using the land for barley cultivation because there is no more natural vegetation for them. You can see the images, it can tell you a lot about soil erosion. The stream is a good indication to tell you how rainfall is erratic on those areas. I don't like to show this photo, I'm not proud of it, but this is again another proof that there was something living in the area of the Badia. So it seems that this photo for a man who killed a wild animal with his son. It is in his lap. So this is before using, like they started using guns to hunt wild animals in the Badia. And by the way, Badia in turn, it is not only referring to Jordan Badia, it is also known in Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. So if we look into the Jordan agro-ecosystem, you can see if you move from the east to the west, you can see that the Badia agro-system is dominating there. And if you look at the green west part of the country agro-ecosystem, it is the irrigated area. So basically all the water is collected from the surfaces to the dams, and then at the end it will be flushed to the irrigated areas in Jordan. Most of our watershed will go to the Jordan Valley, but some of our water go outside. So what is going on in the Badia? So this is really from the sites where we work. You can see the plowing line of the barley cultivation. You can see some green shrubs, but these are Ambassade syriaca. This is unpalatable species. It used to be in the ecosystem with a minimum, let's say, number, but due to it has no other vegetation to compete with, it has the chance to grow and spread out. And you can find it close to the streams or gullies in the valley or on the hilltops. This image, I'm sure, like you see it year after year. Amman is flooding. The water color is soil, and this is the impact of having or losing the vegetation cover in the upland area. So there are many research and many ancient evidence saying that there is water harvesting techniques were used in not only in the Badia, in the castles, and everywhere you go in Jordan. You can see even in Patra there is also ways of water harvesting. So the exposure and vulnerability of dry lands or rangeland in general, it has like low seasonal rainfall and high rainstorm intensities, as well as it has a huge amount of erosion. So what we're trying to improve and provide for the decision makers in Jordan and in the other countries, that could be a potential, this area could be a potential for improving using water harvesting techniques. These techniques, it's not new. The basic concept of these techniques is to simply facilitate and concentrate and store water, excess water, let's say, of the rainfall in a defined location. So basically, the current condition of our 90% area of the country is degraded, and we're trying to improve that there will be an option for restoration. So we're trying to use water harvesting and planting of native species to restore this ecosystem. So basically, we're thinking like the same methodology that you're thinking of, Deema. Like, if you look into the photo A, it has, this is from a Semaine wildlife reserve. It is protected, okay? because it is protected from human interventions, from livestock grazing, we're thinking that can we bring the current degraded stage to a restored stage? So there is a way to do this, and ICARDA started doing this research in Syria back, and we tried to start the same terminology in Jordan and test it scientifically. So we started a very famous project in Al-Majidiyya village based on community-based rehabilitation approach. It is near the airport, Queen Alia Airport, 13 kilometers to the east of the airport. We have selected, based on analysis using GIS method, we have selected a small watershed. In this small watershed, we have implemented 3 interventions. Number 1, below the images, we implemented what's so-called in situ water harvesting techniques and planting of native species. And in the stream way, we have implemented a gully blocks. 55 gully blocks were installed in 1 kilometer length of a stream. And in the downstream areas, which is in the top of the slide, we have also implemented what's so-called marab. Marab, it's Arabic word referred to a fertile land. In the marab we constructed like blocks, or let's say dams with the spillways, and we planted barley in that area. So this is how it looks like in the treated watershed with the sub-watershed with the in situ micro water harvesting. We have the machine. That machine called, very famous in Jordan, called Valerani machine. It is based on the Italian guy who produced it, but ICARDA invested a lot in making it laser guiding. So this is an automatic way to do semicircular ponds that will be placed on the hill slope in a way that will capture water. And we did the outplanting with the help of local community. And the image can tell you how the site looked like after some years of working there. The gully block, it was constructed in the wadis. The aim of it to reduce the runoff erosion rates and keeping the soil at the site. The downstream area, it is check dams and the spillway, we put barley because the approach that we're looking for is to try to convince local community and hopefully the government to adapt such technology. Like we're telling the farmers, please don't use or cultivate barley in the upstream areas. And instead we're providing a high yield barley in the downstream area. Just to give you some numbers, the barley production in the unmarab areas and hill slope areas ranges between 10 to 40 kilogram per dönum, while in the marab we have between 500 to 600 kilogram per dönum. And this is a huge difference, and farmers always, and Dr. Nizar is aware of this, like, please, we need to do marab, we need to do marab. But this is also just to tell you that one site kept as a control site, that we don't use anything from the site, like we did not do any intervention, but to show you, I'm not sure like if you can see the green, please go. One more. No. One more.
But before or after?
No, after, like, next. So this is the marab. I just want you to see the marab technology and how the production is high. Then next, please. And in this photo, I want you to see the green area on the top of this side. This is the marab, how it looked like compared to the traditional agricultural practice. And in the photos on the bottom, you can see nothing actually, but this is where exactly the same time where the livestock are grazing. So if you ask any farmers in the Badia, he will tell you now that, or she will tell you, that they are using the natural grazing, but they are meaning the barley, the grazing. Next, please. So, and for this nice discussion, I just wanted to give you a proof, science-based, of the using of the in situ microwater harvesting. So basically, what these structures do, they are made intermittent, not continuous, and there is a ridge at the end of the structure, and there is 2 small species that planted in each bed, and all of these are based on calculations. Like we use soil information, rainfall, soil depth, and others. Next, please. So basically, rain will come on the surface. Next, please. Then the rain will be kept or harvested in those beds for a while. Next, please. And some of the water will go down, and the plant will have the chance to grow. This is the results of our very scientific method to prove that this technology can be used. We have installed a set of 56 soil moisture sensors that will measure the soil moisture in the pits and between the pits. And you can see the blue line in this graph. It shows you for 1 year of monitoring of these data on a weekly basis that there is still soil moisture higher than in the interspace. It means that the pit can hold the soil moisture that the plant needs. Next, please. And this is a spatial, let's say, vision of the soil moisture behavior. So if you see the dark blue in the middle, this is where the pits exist. This is the top diagram is the soil moisture of from 0 to 20 centimeter, and the next from 20 to 40 centimeter. And you can see the whole year the pits hold hold moisture, and it is very clear in the lower depth it has it more compared to the spacing of this. What does this mean? This means that the shrubs have a high survival rate, that the shrubs will grow, and it is well known that the rangeland species usually grow in summer quicker than in winter, but the structure provide the enough water for the plant to grow. Next, please. Other research we did, very close to your work, that we tried to simulate the past of the vegetation cover in the valley. We tried to develop several baseline conditions, we call it baseline. It means the historical baseline. We have visited protected areas, we have visited Wadi al-Butum, I think the image you showed from Wadi al-Butum. We visited Desert Castle just to see how it looked like. We consulted experts from NARC, from several rangeland specialists in the country, and we developed 9 scenarios for the current degraded area, which was easily to measure through measuring plant cover and the ground cover. And we have also developed 9 scenarios based on restored site in the country. And the results shows that if we restore this ecosystem, we might bring back this ecosystem to its equilibrium phase. By the way, the structure of in situ water harvesting never meant to stay for lifelong. It is the main player at the beginning of the life of these shrubs. It provides the needed water storage for these shrubs to grow. But with time, the pits itself will be degraded. and the shrub will be the main player in those ecosystems. If the image is I will finish. No, can you go a little bit to this image? The image shows that the average runoff rate and the soil erosion rate of the restored areas can come to its equilibrium phase. So we're providing this as evidence-based and proven scientifically technologies. And you can see this is our site before restoration and this is after restoration. Dr. Nizar visited our site and he said it is a model to be visited. So you're welcome. I have to admit that recently, the last 2 years, we received a very drought season. We did not receive the average annual rainfall. And if you're interested to know, this is 130 millimeter annual rainfall. And still the plants are there, protected by local community. And the land is used based on grazing management by local community. And we're hoping to have, the barrier as a Semaine, because it is basically very close to a Semaine. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for too much
Well, thank you very much, Mira, for the wonderful presentation. As I want to say that it's really one time to see is better than 100 times to hear. So I really highly recommend that if you are really interested in the land restoration, to see a real example that is existing without any interventions, without bringing manure, fertilizers, whatever from outside, even not stones, not dicks, nothing. Only from within the ecosystem. Then Majdiya is the most important example, and it's the main concept is to give the soil seed bank the opportunity to survive by providing it with enough water. Well, Dr. Thomas, I had the honor to meet you before Corona, and then I understood that he was trapped because of Corona within a regenerative agriculture farm in Rajab with Faris. I've been following your interesting work that you are doing with Faris and his family in the farm, and the very important capacity building courses that Firas, the very important training courses that you've been giving and providing about regenerative agriculture and nature inclusive agriculture. I just want to highlight that Thomas do have a long experience in the region. He had been doing a lot of work also before coming to Jordan within the West Bank in Palestine, and he's the author of 2 books that are available online. One of them is Agroforestry for Palestine, Good Trees for a Better Future. This is the first book, and the second book is Trees of Palestine. And as I mentioned, they are available online. I'm passionate to hear how things have been developing between you and our incubated family, by the way, in our agriculture innovation incubator at NARC, and we look forward really to hear how things are going on with you. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Nizar. May I stand up? Is that okay? Just feel a bit weird to be sat down, if you don't mind. So I wasn't going to talk about TAYYUN. I was going to keep to soil tonight. And I must say, I'm thrilled to see a room full of people who gave up their evening to come and learn about soil. Like, I wouldn't have expected that. I will be as brief as possible, but what I want to try to do, rather audaciously, is give you the history of soil in Jordan, what went wrong, and how we can fix it. Okay, all in a few minutes. Get your pens and paper out. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet tonight. Like, everything that's already been said, I completely agree with, and you've given great examples illustrating some of the points I'm about to make here. So I'll jump right in, and obviously I have to be very simplistic to get through the full sort of scope of time and material, but I just want to kind of give you a narrative arc of what's happened, because I think that's often what's lacking. People approach a problem without kind of realising the whole context of it, how we got to this situation. So, history of soil in Jordan. The soil here is not made by the rock. Here in the highlands of Jordan, we've only got limestone, which weathers chemically. So it washes away in solution, like sugar in tea. Instead, this soil is atmospheric dust, which was gathered by the plants, especially the trees. So we've heard about other ecosystems tonight, but, and you're going to have to use your imagination here, all of Jordan had wooded ecosystems, all of it. Even the mobile dune systems had a woody component to the flora. And these plants were able to gather the dust that blew off the deserts of specifically North Africa and Arabia, given the prevailing wind directions here. So another way to think about trees is that they are machines that use starlight to build soil. Let's have a look. So literally they use the sunlight, so the energy which arrives at Earth in the electromagnetic spectrum, and then they turn that into chemical energy, which is stored in the soil in carbon-to-carbon bonds, so carbohydrates. The gradual accumulation of the soil over hundreds of thousands of years. Remember that this region wasn't glaciated during the last glacial maximum, so the soils here are at least 300,000 years old, perhaps much older. So this atmospheric dust that was floating around and got caught by the trees is then added to, like the trees then donate their bodies to make the soil. They contribute the organic materials, so the soils here are a combination of Saharan dust and the accumulated dead bodies of particularly the plants, but to a much lesser degree the fungi and the animals that live in them. So this soil accumulation happens over hundreds of thousands of years, really gradually, and it's the increasing depth of soil is really crucial. It's like the crucial factor in the ecosystems of this land finally being able to express themselves in what we call a climatic climax community. So a climatic climax community is an ecological community which has the highest primary productivity possible at that latitude, at that altitude, on that geology. So let me put it another way. The climatic climax community is that assemblage of plants and animals and fungi which are able to collect the greatest amount of energy from the sun per day and per meter. No other kind of ecological configuration could bring more energy into the system. And as we've already established, that energy is then converted into chemical energy, and that's what powers the entire ecosystem. So, as well as obviously pulling the CO2 out of the atmosphere and making these carbohydrates, the plants, in many cases, are also able to pull the nitrogen out of the atmosphere in association with other organisms, but we don't have time to go into the detail now. And then they create nitrites and nitrates, which are available then within the ecosystem. And because plants, especially in these ecosystems, have deep roots, they're in contact with lots of the geology, so they're able to bring up other essential minerals like phosphates, calcium, all sorts of other stuff, which they can then contribute to that mix. So here the climatic climax community is the oak forest. So that's here in Amman. We don't have time to go into the differences and the different types of forests throughout the country, but the important point is it was all wooded ecosystems, either woodland or savanna. Right, so let's keep the focus on the soil, right? So this soil is accumulating over hundreds of thousands of years. Around about 10,000 years ago, that soil accumulation stopped. So the dust didn't stop blowing off the Sahara. The air was still full of dust, The point was the trees weren't there to catch it anymore. So deforestation in this region started long before Homo sapiens ever evolved, before they stepped out of Africa. There were other hominids here who were making stone tools, and they were also using fire to clear the forests. So as a cumulative effort, both of those hominids and our own species, we had cleared enough forest that there was no longer a net appreciation of soil in these hills. So the dust is still falling on the land, but it's now getting eroded away at the same rate that it's arriving. So we no longer have an accumulation of soil. So that's 10,000 years ago. From about 10,000 years ago, we then have an accelerating rate of soil erosion. So remember, the dust keeps coming, but the trees are no longer there to catch it because they've been burned or cleared away. And the wind and the water, in the form of rainfall and the overland flow down into the Woodyan, as you know, I'm sure you've all seen these spectacular floods that happen. You know, it starts with a few drips running off a rock, and then they go down to the wadi, which joins another wadi, and so on. Before you know it, you have these spectacular floods carrying rocks the size of cars down the Woodyan and blasting out into the Dead Sea. Let's have a look. So the present rate of soil erosion, so here are some numbers for you to think about. Of course, it's always very site-specific, but we're looking at about 30 tonnes per hectare on the ridge tops. We're looking at 70 tonnes per hectare on the slopes, and in excess of 140 tonnes per hectare in the wadi ecosystems. Obviously, this is just from one research site. It will be variable across different sites. But if you could, if you set up a camera for long enough and you did a bit of time-lapse photography, you could literally watch the soil flowing off the Rocky Mountains like icing off a warm cake. Yeah. So, what are we going to do about it? The answer is soil regeneration. Now, we can go out, we can buy peat moss, we can buy some zibble, put them in a heap. Carlos, you've done it. You've regenerated soil. It's finished, yeah? The point is that approach is impractically expensive on a national scale, or even on the scale of a large farm. You know, by the time you get over 3 dunham, 6 dunham, it's prohibitively expensive to take that approach. So instead, we've got to use the regenerative power of the ecosystem. So there's this force in nature, there's this force in all ecosystems for regeneration. So, you know, even I've just given you this description of soil erosion, desertification, loss of biodiversity, and the clearance of the woody plants. And you think, oh, you know, you might feel a little dispirited by that and think, well, how on earth are we going to put all of this back? I mean, how are we going to bring back, you know, hundreds of tons of soil every year? And the answer is that we don't have to do it. Like, if we just step aside and give the ecosystems the opportunity, they'll do it themselves, just like they did it the first time. They can do it again. Right? We can still grow trees all over Jordan. The rain is still falling from the sky. There's still the fertile dust blowing from the Sahara and the Arabian deserts. The sun is still shining. There is no practical impediment to restoring native ecosystems. So, thank you very much to ICARDA for thoroughly going through rainwater harvesting. That saves me a few minutes. It's absolutely crucial to get the water into the soil. It's falling from the sky, but often it just runs quickly across the surface and down to the wadi and off. Every soil has a maximum infiltration rate, so that's volume by area by time. By that I mean there's only so much water that can pass through the surface soil per meter per minute. So if the intensity of the precipitation event exceeds the maximum infiltration rate of that soil, then the water is going to remain above the soil and start to slide off with gravity, and that's where erosion starts, and so on. We as individuals or as communities, I'm thinking of Dubai now, which might be a bit of an exception, but we tend not to have any influence over the amount of water that's falling from the sky. So we can't really influence volume, but we can influence area and time, as has been demonstrated to us tonight. If you can, using very simple earthen structures, and I won't go into detail here, we can retain that precipitation on the surface of the land and spread it over a larger area, just using very simple earthen structures, this micro sculpting of the landscape. This spreads it over a larger area of soil, and it also holds it on the land for longer. So we're affecting those last two factors in the maximum infiltration rate. Sometimes I think, of course, I would rather be studying some exotic birds fighting over tropical fruits, to be honest. Like, I'm an ecologist, this is my real interest. But sometimes I think I was put here in Jordan just to change the permeability of that top 5 millimeters of soil. Like, that's the kind of crucial thing that we need to focus on in order to get a grip on our soils, and in turn, the ecosystems will rebuild themselves. And of course, I know we need to eat, and I did mention native or spontaneous ecosystems, but I think that there's no contradiction between creating rapidly regenerating native ecosystems and us harvesting from them what we need to eat. Like, you can insert into them all the crop plants and the animals you want. But if you don't have, if the photosynthesis isn't happening, if you don't have the healthy soil with the fungal element which is required, then the crop plants you want to grow or the animals that you want to farm are going to be limited in terms of resources. So first of all, fix your ecosystem, and then second, insert your agricultural crops, plants and animals, and then you'll be able to harvest them sustainably. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Thomas, very much for the really very impressive presentation, especially that what you mentioned was almost summarizing everything everyone was saying. And honestly, I think the first key that we have to use is to change the surface of the soil, to make sure that we are improving the infiltration rate, because doing that, we are creating the correct microorganism ecosystem that would allow the soil seed bank to regenerate and continue. Many of the degraded lands need just protection. And there are very nice examples, for example, in Niger, where they have been able to regenerate thousands of hectares only by protection. Here in Jordan, we do have a very nice example, in addition to what ICARDA was doing and is doing in Majdiya, what we have in Hima Bani Hashim, also a protected area where just an agreement between the community, let's circulate the grazing behavior and let's protect the area from overgrazing. And they have now a very nice example. I think we all together need to work with our the community and with our international environment and agriculture community to work together for the good, not only for Jordan, but also to be kind of a hub to give the information also outside the country. I will hand it to Livia, and I'm sure that you have next step to do, and I will have the opportunity to watch what you'll be doing.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, our speakers, for your time and this very insightful conversation that I hope will start here but will continue further. And this was also a bit of the point of the event. It was to gather people together that know each other already, but not necessarily, and to try to create dynamics in order for change to happen when it comes to soil, and maybe to switch also a little bit this focus that especially in Jordan is very much focused on the water scarcity, without taking into account how soil is important also in preserving water itself. And thank you, Mr. Haddad, for being here with us today and facilitating the discussion. And I'm very grateful also to people that are in the public to whom I went for advice and that have been counseling me in an essential way for this event to happen. So I have tons of questions, but if there's already questions from the public, I would give the priority to the room. Otherwise, I can speak for 2 hours. Yeah. So I'd like to have, my first question would be more about policy. So what we typically see nowadays is an acceleration of everything. And in politics, this is very much true. So everybody wants to see very short-term results. And in Jordan, this is specifically true when it comes also to international aid. That is very much of an influence on how governmental structure often work. So how can we convince policymakers to settle down for a process that is slower and that won't necessarily show effects straight away, but that is at the same time extremely necessary? Or whoever else.
Now, you are dragging us to politics. يعني بدأت تفوتنا بالخيط. نحن معودين على القصة. Actually,
talk about other
يعني I would say that in general, the people in power, the people who have the authority and who can put laws in any society, if this is not controlled, I would say, by the society, then, and if there is a lack of democracy, directly or indirectly, then these powers will put the laws and assign activities in line with their interests. They would see their interests as a priority rather than the interests of the society. So I would say that the civil society, the local communities, and the academic centers in any country, we're not talking about Jordan now, in any country, if these joint efforts in order to practice their right to assess the laws of the country, besides, of course, the parliament, because not all parliaments are efficient or active or capable, maybe. So I call upon people, upon the society, civil society, local community, to look after their interests as being the interests of the nation. Because As we all know, the governments would stay for some time. The people will die, but the nation is there. Thank you.
I don't talk politics, but I have to say that it is not easy to restore. For example, let's say or assume that the government will do in situ water harvesting. It is not easy to implement everywhere because there is many difficulties we face. The implementation process is. I think there is still a need to know how best we should implement the technology to achieve a good results. And also there should be, I agree with you, of local community call to change. Because working sometimes in the Badia area is hard to change the people mindset that please don't let's say, plow barley and replace it with the in-situ water harvesting. So this is sometimes hard to change. So I think it is the role of maybe extensions and maybe policy, enabling policy. Because I know, for example, in Syria, for example, it is not allowed to cultivate barley in the rangeland or in the Badia. So such laws will prohibit action and will save our soil, because I agree with you, to restore the top first 5 centimeters of soil, it will need hundreds of years. So we're talking about degraded land. The only option to restore it or rehabilitate it, whatever the term that you want to use, but I think you need to do action, and this action will not be easily to implement without both-sided local community calls or need to make a change and forcing, let's say, the public, let's say, benefit over the private benefit, because land ownership is also a question mark in the degraded areas. It is like, if you have a land, I will not tell you as a government how to use it. Not much, let's say, like a say for the government on the rangeland areas. They are free to use it any way they wanted to use it. Thank you.
I think where we have private land ownership, you've got no excuses and you should just get on with it. Like, all you need is a fast and a torilla and a spare afternoon. It's really not that difficult. There's a ton of YouTube videos. You don't need us experts to tell you how to do it. It's the information's easy to come by. I think on a national level, then we're indebted to pioneers like Faras and Alexia and Osama and Rahab and Dana in Fez, who are doing these things already, and you can go and visit them and get practical experience of how it's implemented. I'm not so skeptical about, or rather so, I don't think it takes that long, from my experience, to have a big effect in a small area. As your own data showed there, I could see it was like doubling or even tripling the soil humidity within just the first years. Imagine when you've actually got some trees there, and you're looking at probably 10 times the soil humidity after 6 years. And this was an extremely dry, windy area, right? However, one of the problems I face working here is where we have more ambiguous ownership of land. Where it's owned by a family, and it's often caught up in inheritance disputes, or there are various owners, but the actual parcels that they own have never been demarked legally. And this really is a problem. I'm not sure I have the solutions for that, but I think and that affects a much greater percentage of the land area of Jordan than these nice, neatly, privately owned parcels of land. But I think in all cases, if we can set up economically successful experimental sites in different parts of the country which are visible and accessible to local communities. I think that's the best way, because none of us like to be told what to do. And anyway, let's face it, we don't really know what to do. We're all experimenting and we're working out how to do it by mistakes. So I think if you can demonstrate a system which is bringing in an income in the short term, then people will replicate it. That's my experience. Or rather, that's my biggest hope. So don't look to the government, don't look to the experts, don't look to the NGOs, just get on with it. You already have everything you need.
Thank you. Just I would like to add something about the private property, because from my perspective, private property is an issue now because it has been westernized in the sense that there were shared ways of sharing land that weren't as problematic, and that the fact of sharing the land in a very strict way is actually somehow the beginning of the problem. Just.
I just want to start from where Thomas ended. Don't go to NGOs. Yet they are here and they are working. So I was just wondering about a way to mainstream these principles, these guidelines in the work of NGOs, because since they are here and they are doing the work, because you have mentioned also the international aid, how can I mainstream these principles in their work, maybe through a committee, through, I don't know, ideas? Thank you. No, I need you to answer.
We know about soil, you know about NGOs.
And I think ICARDA has an experience with NGOs. I mean, I know our projects will maximum last 1.5 years, but then how can we implement longer than that? How can I will not solve the soil issue, but how can I integrate this in my practices?
Well, we work also with local NGOs. I'm not sure if you know Wadi NGO. We work with them. The thing that it would be great actually to have NGO. I always encourage the local community, especially the youth in the community. I tell them all the time, please start to think of building an NGO, register it under the Ministry of Environment, so you can maintain the sites. Yes, you're right, like the projects will not last forever, but since we're a research institution, we're starting this work in, let's say, 2015 and the implementation 2016, and still we have things that we need to investigate, and I'm providing the evidence on it. But I encourage you maybe to build something with this local community. This is not a government land, this is a private land ownership, and I really encourage, I don't know who is the right person to go and talk to this community, but this is not our, let's say, research part of it, even though we do a lot of community building, like capacity development for the local women. We do a lot of research on livestock, milk equality, and so on. But I have to say that in Arabic language, ICARDA also has a, let's say, did not work well on that, but I think maybe because we're working with NARC, and maybe the role of extension should come in and see how would be the impact if this has happened. But thanks for the idea, and please feel free to call and we can agree on something.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting subject. About the ecosystem, I think it's easy, cheap, and fast. To Dr. Nizar, I hope that you would make a brochure or something like this about that, and Mr. Jaajaa also. It's very important to tell the people around Jordan, especially in Badia, about this system. We didn't know it, a lot of money, we didn't capital to do that. Thank you very much.
Hello, thanks for the talk. It's a bit a similar question, so I don't know if it's the right forum to ask, but you probably know in India they have the PAMI Foundation. They've organized a water cup, so they make villages compete. just to get rid of the governmental needs for. I was wondering, again, I don't know if it's the right forum, but how could this be implemented here? What would be the blocking points, but what would be also the possibilities that we could create? Because people are suffering from drought and floods as much as they are there, and so that there could be potentially a drive for change on that scale.
If you don't mind, I'll take several questions so that we do a round.
Hi, thank you for talking based on experiences. That was helpful. I have a specific question related to water retention. In the last 2 years, I came a lot across young companies that are trying to solve that issue and are either manufacturing or importing hydrogels that they apply to the soil, synthetic hydrogels. Now, these are quite restricted in Europe and in other countries, and they're a bit controversial in terms of their impact. Have you experienced with them on the long term in terms of their environmental impact on soil, on water, on plant health in Jordan or anywhere else in the region? Or do you know how restricted they are in terms of regulation? Or do you have experience with more organic-based absorbents that could be added to the soil and have a similar function, which are now being researched and developed? That's a particular question in case anyone has experience with that.
Thank you very much. I would ask about the water harvesting. Some say that the water harvesting could make soil degradation and destroy the biodiversity. How could we defend our side about the water harvesting? Thank you.
I think we can start from Hassan. I guess all of you have something to say, no? Start first.
I would just maybe start with the last question. Water is a force that could be destructive or creative. It depends on how we let nature recover on its own, or through human intervention where we can accelerate that. But definitely, when we talk about right interventions for rainwater harvesting, they would help the ecosystem as a whole to recover. Again, just a small note on that. And for the use of hydrogens, personally, we rely on using natural materials. We are aware that it is being promoted and used by different projects in Jordan. But for us, it's about solving the root causes of the problem and improving the soil itself for the very long-term sustainable results, as opposed to having a quick fix. But at the same time, I'm sure that for each of the projects there are different conditions that it might be. Again, I'm not personally aware of the side effects of it or any restrictions on its use in Jordan. But in our interventions, we try to focus on using an all-natural materials and approach. And I forgot, what was the third question? India, okay. There are amazing projects in India, and the scale of it is really quite unbelievable. But it's really interesting to see that in all of these different locations, it's initiated by the people, and they can actually sense the need for it, and they are the ones promoting it and making it happen. Of course, there are certain leaders that are showing people the full potential of these different interventions. But for these projects to be quite successful, it really needs genuine adoption by the people themselves. And I think, as previously discussed, it's about demonstrating solutions and making people actually see how these solutions offer them what they need. And once we have that, and again, we don't have to rely on governmental projects, I believe, and grassroots action, and how it could be carried out by people on the ground. Even small-scale interventions can, demonstrate some successful solutions, and how it can be taken further. I'm not aware of any project with that scale in Jordan, but I hope that one day we would have.
So in response to the question regarding ecological degradation as a consequence of rainwater harvesting, I'll try to answer, but I'm going to keep it strictly focused on soil, because there's so much to talk about, but that's a subject tonight. With any sort of ecological intervention, be it agricultural or otherwise, we have a variety of water sources at our disposal, and those water sources are of different qualities. So we have groundwater, we have wastewater, and we have rainwater. So of those, rainwater is far and away the safest and the most effective to use. So I would definitely promote rainwater harvesting techniques as the least environmentally, or let's say ecologically, degraded or disruptive. However, in ecology, everything's always extremely complicated and there's a lot going on. So there are certain things we need to pay attention to. And one that springs to mind are invasive species. But here again, if we're using the rainwater, we might create temporarily an increased soil humidity. And if the only plants around who are casting their seeds into this area are like ecologically destabilizing invasive species. So here in Jordan, of course, we've got a lot of the psyllium, the Chrysoprase juliflora. We've got the Nicotina glauca, which is kind of a glaucous tobacco from Bolivia, along with countless others, but these are very conspicuous. These might be early colonizers. However, I would be confident that they'll be rapidly outcompeted, or at least with a little management on our part, with a bit of knowledge, you can literally weed them out and make sure that they don't come to dominate. And just focusing on soil again, invasive species only get a chance to degrade ecosystems if the soil in that ecosystem is already degrading, usually eroding. I think of them as like pathogenic infections of wounds on the body. So if the skin is already wounded, if you can think of like these, like we saw in the slideshows, these gullies, these cuts into the soil caused by runoff, and in Wudian, and as we also have periodically wildfires here in Jordan. These create wounds in the ecology which then become infected with these invasive species. So with rainwater harvesting, we're aiming to stabilize the soils and to increase the humidity, which should decrease the proportion of plants growing there, which are these invasive species, especially with time. But it's complicated, and it's always case by case, and we can't prescribe one technique for everywhere. So you're right to raise it as an issue. Like, we can never take our eye off this or be complacent and say, do this, it'll be fine. We always need to be monitoring and applying feedback to the practices that we have to make sure that we're not degrading the environment.
I will comment on the note about the water gel you've mentioned. We tried that in Lebanon, actually. I think it was in 1972. although Lebanon has a lot of water, actually, but we did some experiments at AUB, at the American University of Beirut, which was the university where I graduated. We could not find that this is acceptable on the economical level. It's extremely too expensive. It could be beneficial if used very partially by very wealthy countries, perhaps in the Gulf. And mainly because most of the soil there is sandy. Whereas in Jordan, for example, there are some areas with sandy soil, but most of the areas are clayey. We have a majority of clay, and I think we have a high content of calcium carbonate as well. So the water retention capacity of the soil in general in Jordan is good, but the problem is the scarcity of water. Now, regarding the scarcity of water, I have written down 3 points. First, we are being deprived of our water by the Zionist enemy, by Israel, the Zionist enemy, in the north, in Jordan River, and also in the south, in Wadi Araba zone. This is one point. The second point, I think we should work on improving the efficiency of water quality, which is being done by the water treatment plants. The water treatment plants, I think, if we work better on them, and if we invest more money, the government that is invests more money in these projects, we will get a much better quality of water, less salinity, less biological impurities, etc. And a third point is, I think the government also should work seriously to rectify the water distribution networks. In some areas, I think we are losing around 70% of the water because the water distribution networks are not in good condition. Thank you.
Okay, just not to expand on what my colleague said here, but just I have to comment on the using of the water harvesting and integrated biodiversity. First, you need to make sure that you are bringing native rangeland species, and this should be done in consultation with, rangeland botanic specialists. That they will tell you, okay, this is a native species for this region. And I have to say that, like in the intention of just to see if there is any seed bank will grow without any vegetation, we had some pits without planting, without we put the plants there. There is not much, let's say, shrubs growing, because really we're at a stage of really degrading the soil. We noticed, and Dr. Nizar were also on this side, in the wadi and let's say in the banks of the gullies, there is a lot of herbals coming back. That's only where you can see them. But in the pit itself, where we have a plant, because the plant itself break the soil, increase the soil moisture, increase the fertility with time, and for sure carbon and all what has been summarized today. And I don't think our communities will do the same like India, but I think the NGO can have a say to direct some of the funds that can come to the government to such projects that will benefit the ecosystem, livelihood, and maybe mitigate or adapt to climate change?
I think Dr. Haddad wanted to react as well.
One of the points that I want to highlight is that the problem is not only with governments, the problem is with scientists who are not delivering the message in a correct way that a policymaker would understand it. In many occasions, we are very good in writing scientific publications, but we do not know how to write just a simple article for the public. And this is due to probably two problems. We have the problem that now, generally the population in the world, not only in Jordan, yes, educated, but not necessarily مثقفين, not necessarily culturally warmly well developed. So I think this is one of the problems, and I think this is a global problem rather than local problem. But I can give some enlightenment about good examples when we simplified the science in a way that policymakers can adopt by giving clear numbers of the value and the impact. I can say His Excellency Prime Minister Bashar al-Hassan took our 2 studies and he came to the parliament proudly saying our National Agricultural Research Center did 1, 2, 3, and we are going to implement our green water harvesting map and our agricultural map. We can debate on that, but at least there are some activities that are, I can say that they are positive. The other thing, what is the opportunity of making NGOs being active in bringing science to the community? Unfortunately, some of the NGOs are coming with 4-wheel drive, fancy mobile, camera that would cost almost the same price of the house where the refugee or the vulnerable family is living, and we are teaching them how to change the environment. They will see us, even if we are Jordanian, they will see us as foreigners. Yeah. So honestly, there are many NGOs where you can see that, for example, they have a grant or they have their own resources to implement a development project. 90% of the money goes as salaries for them, and 10% goes for the tasking. Or let me, not exaggerating, maybe minimum 70%. So this is a very important problem that we have to understand and we have to see. There are many wonderful NGOs that are working, but I think to touch the base with the community, we have to encourage them not just as NGOs, we have to encourage them to establish cooperatives based on their interests. The future will not give opportunity for smallholders, for small farmers, if they are not integrated within cooperatives to be capable to survive because they don't have the economy of scale. So I think this is a very important. The other thing is, there are many fancy tools to use. Different cocoons, different gels, everything. The best, all are fine. But we have to understand and evaluate the long-term impact of what we are doing. Because if the tree will learn that the water is only existing in the surface, and at one stage when you stop irrigating, it doesn't have a strong rootstock that dig down to have the water. So I think, and again, the best approach is not bringing seedlings, rather I think seeds that would survive, and and it will be even cheaper to go with seeds rather than seedlings. You can do both. But again, we don't know what would be the long-term impact of using those gels, neither on tree nor on the environment. So I think the best is the easiest. Just make those dikes and go on. Sorry for maybe a long comment.
On the contrary, thank you very much.